Hey, thanks for joining me today on Backroads Tourist. I'm Jeff, and if you've followed this channel, you know that this week I'm dusting off some of the old videos I've done over the last 3 years that have some connection to faith or religion. I thought this would be appropriate as we get closer to the Easter weekend. What did you think of yesterday's video? Well, when I recorded it, I thought it was pretty amazing, and in case you missed it, it was a video of an old railroad caboose. A hobo had moved in back in the early 60s and had drawn scenes from the book of Revelation all over the inside walls. Check it out if you haven't already. Today's video is even more amazing. I heard this story back when I was a kid, and about 2 years ago, I finally had the chance to visit the place where it happened. A church exploded, and 15 people should have died in that explosion, but they didn't. I hope you enjoy one of my favorite stories. We're visiting a church where a miracle happened. Thanks for joining me today. I'm Jeff, and we're on our way to Beatrice, Nebraska. Beatrice, Nebraska is home to some really beautiful churches, but the most famous church in town looks much less ornate than many of the other churches. This is the Westside Baptist Church. It was rebuilt in the early 1950s because the first church was destroyed. But that's not what this video is really all about. It's about a very strange set of circumstances associated with the destruction of the church. On March 1st, 1950, 15 members of the Westside Baptist Church were scheduled to begin choir practice at the church at 7:20 p.m. At 7:25, 5 minutes after choir practice was supposed to start, a gas leak in the church ignited and the church exploded. The walls exploded outward and the roof collapsed. The blast was so powerful that windows were shattered for blocks around. A nearby radio station was knocked off the air and much of the town lost power. Yet none of the choir members were injured. Why? Because they were all running late that night. Now, if they had all been on a bus together and the bus had broken down, that would be a lucky coincidence, but that wasn't the case. They all had different reasons for running late that night. Reverend Klempel and his wife Eunice were usually the first to arrive, but that night, as they were leaving, they noticed that their toddler daughter had a stain on her dress. Eunice had to find and iron a new dress for her daughter, and that made them late. LaDonna Vandegrift was a high school student and was having trouble with a geometry problem in her homework. She usually went to choir practice early, but she wanted to solve that problem before she left that night. Royina Estes was having trouble with her car that night, so she and her sister called LaDonna and asked for a ride, but as I just told you, LaDonna was running late. Sadie Estes was also having car problems that evening. Her car refused to start, so she couldn't make it to choir practice. Mrs. Leonard Schuster and her infant daughter were usually pretty prompt, but that night they had to go to her mother's house to help her get ready for a missionary meeting. Herbert Kipf, who was the bass in the choir, had been putting off writing an important letter. He finally got around to it and wanted to finish it and get it in the mail that night. The letter took a bit longer to write than he thought, and that's what put him behind schedule. Joyce Black's excuse was that, in her words, she was feeling just plain lazy, and stayed in her warm house as long as she could before heading to the church. She was almost ready to leave when the blast occurred. Harvey All was planning on taking his 2 boys to practice with him, but they got to talking and just lost track of time. Mrs. F.E. Paul and her daughter Marilyn were always early. Mrs. Paul was the choir director and Marilyn was the pianist, so they had to be there. They usually arrived half an hour early, but tonight Marilyn fell asleep after dinner. Her mother woke her up once, but Marilyn fell asleep again. Her mother woke her up a second time again at 7:15, and they were rushing to get out the door. Lucille Jones and Dorothy Wood were classmates and neighbors, and they always came to practice together. But that night, Lucille was engrossed in a radio program that lasted until 7:30, and she really wanted to hear the ending. And Dorothy, being a good friend, waited for her. So what do you think? Was it a lucky coincidence times 15, or
Did a higher power have some kind of hand in saving the lives of 15 people that day? I'm a man of faith, so I know which side of the fence I'm standing on. I'm Jeff. Thanks for joining me on Backroads Tourist, and I'll see you on the back roads.